Shalom Aleichem. My name is Rabbi Joey. You've reached the Yoke Messiah YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us for another week for another Parsha, another Midrash on that Parsha. It is for Parsha Shemini. Big one. A lot of interesting stuff happens, and we are very glad that you joined us. If you want to reach me directly, you can always at yokamessiah@gmail.com. If you don't make it to the end of the Midrash, you can always reach us there. Let's see. I apologize. I left my prayer book upstairs. So I'm getting.
Do you want me to get mine, honey?
I think I've got it here.
Okay.
All right. Barku Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Elam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher barkamanu mikol ha'amim v'nata lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is to be blessed.
Bless the Lord who be blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments and given to us his holy Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Amen.
All right. So starting in Leviticus chapter 9, verses 1 through 16, would anybody like to kick us off with Aliyah 1?
I'll kick it.
All right.
Yay.
Unless someone else wants to.
No, ma'am. It is yours.
Okay.
This is a first come, first served type of delicatessen.
Let me get it over with. And it was on the 8th day that Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said to Aaron, take for yourself a bull calf as a sin offering and a ram as a burnt offering, both unblemished, and bring them near before the Lord. And to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, take a he-goat as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both in their first year, and both unblemished as a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram as peace offerings, to slaughter before the Lord, and a meal offering mixed with oil, for today the Lord is appearing to you. And they took what Moses had commanded to the front of the tent of meeting, and the entire community approached and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, this is the thing the Lord has commanded, do it, and the glory of the Lord will appear to you. And Moses said to Aaron, approach the altar and perform your sin offering and your burnt offering, atoning for yourself and for the people, and perform the people's sacrifice, atoning for them as the Lord has commanded. So Aaron approached the altar and slaughtered his sin offering calf. And Aaron's son brought forward the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood, placing some on the horns of the altar, and he poured the blood at the base of the altar. And the fat, the kidneys, and the diaphragm with the liver from the sin offering, he caused to go up in smoke on the altar, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he burned the flesh and the hide in fire outside the camp. And he slaughtered the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they presented the burnt offering to him in its prescribed pieces, along with the head, and he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar. And he washed the innards and the legs, and he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar, along with the burnt offering. And he brought forward the people's sacrifice. He took the people's sin offering goat, slaughtered it, and made it a sin offering like the first one. And he brought forward the burnt offering and prepared it according to the law.
All right.
So, Becky, he performed the people's sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
Sacrificial offering.
You did that
Sacrificial.
lovely. You did that so, as a new word, sacrifice.
Is that what I said?
That's what you, and Deidre thought it was funny too.
I'm sure she did.
I did. I was just muted so you couldn't hear me snickering in the background.
Uh-huh.
I was
Sacrifice.
laughing with you.
We're not laughing at you. We're laughing near you.
She did too.
I'm just laughing in your general direction.
All right. So does anybody have any thoughts on Aliyah 1? I definitely don't want to in any way shortchange Alia one, but it kind of always feels like the opening act for the big band you're going to see because everything starts popping off in the second and through the end. Anybody have any thoughts or concerns or insights?
I found it powerful that they had to do the offerings for themselves first
Hmm,
and then do for the people.
true.
So that was one thing I gathered out of that one, is that they had to do it for themselves before the people come into play.
Well, they say if you're in an airplane, you have to put the mask on yourself first so you can help somebody else. And also, the Brit Hadashah does speak about like be careful when you're going to help somebody so that you don't get drugged. Like you reach out to help somebody and then you end up getting drugged down into the same pit that that person is in. So
My mom had a saying for that. You're in a lifeboat and someone's drowning. You don't want them to pull you in. It's easy for someone to pull you under than for
right.
you to pull them out if you're not secure enough.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and they had to be clean for them so they could proceed with the other offering.
Right.
So it behooves leaders to make sure that they're prayed up and ready to be able to minister to the people.
Right. They have to make their own spiritual health a priority in their lives. Because we all know people who have given and given and given and given and given to the point where they give out and then they fall down because they don't have any strength to stand up themselves.
That's right.
And on the nastier side of psychology, unfortunately, there are personality types or sometimes just people in bad situations that they are calling for help, but not because they want help, because they want to drag you down as well. The misery loves company principle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have to be discerning to be careful not to, we all know those folks. Heck, I've been one myself from time to time where we all get a case of the yeah buts. You go to try and help somebody,
Yeah, but
from what Hashem says or what just the training manual says or something, and they say, yeah, but, yeah,
Yeah,
but,
but-
yeah, but. It's like,
no, but
Yeah.
So you
And
have to be discerning.
I think it's significant the first verse is talking about on the 8th day. I think those are noteworthy times.
Say that the first verse says what now?
It talks about being on the 8th day after they've been preparing for this.
Right,
And
where
then
they've been
that
sitting
day,
at the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days and doing their
Uh-huh.
inauguration.
Right.
If what's interesting to me is if they have to do all those sacrifices and offerings and everything before the for the commemoration, which we know Moses actually performed those. It says he actually did all those sacrifices. And then they had to sit for 7 days at the entrance of the tent of meeting. It makes me wonder, like, was Moses just showing them what they're going to have to do, or was that part of their inauguration? And then after they've been amongst the people for 7 days, they had to start like a cleansing process over again for the last 7 days because of everything that's, because they have to make atonement for themselves and atonement for the people. And we know they've been in touch with the people for the last 7 days. Yeah.
Good question.
All right. Anybody have any thoughts or want to move on to Alia 2? Anybody want to read Alia 2? It's also kind of a short one.
I do. I like a short one. I'll do
All
it.
right.
All right, hang on. Okay. Verse 17. And he brought forward the meal offering, filled his palm with it, and caused it to go up in smoke on the altar, in addition to the morning burnt offering. And he slaughtered the ox and the ram and the people's peace offering, and Aaron's son presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they also presented the fats of the ox and from the ram, the tail, the fatty covering the kidneys and the diaphragm with the liver. And they placed the fats on top of the breast, and he caused the fats to go up in smoke on the altar. And Aaron had already waved the breast and the right thigh as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses had commanded. And Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them. He then descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. Then they came out and blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people.
So Aaron lifted up his hands in verse 22 and towards the people and blessed them. He then descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Then he and Moses went into the tent of meeting. Then they came out and blessed the people again, but this time both of them. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Double blessing. When it said, I know, you're not necessarily going upwards always when it says you make ascent or whatever. It just means you may go into a holier place. But when it said in 22, he descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering, do we think that means that he's like basically leaving the temple, or I'm sorry, the Mishkan, and going back to the tent of meeting, to a more common place, typically, I mean, in comparison to the Mishkan, or that he might have actually been standing on the rampway of the offering, because there's a ramp that leads to the burnt offering platform. I don't know if there's a way to know for sure, but I was just thinking about that. Just a little technicality.
I'm just going to be honest. I find the whole Korbanot system very confusing, but I feel like it's very important to know because it is mentioned in the world to come.
Right.
And every time we get to this part, I feel like I read it and I'm just not understanding it. But I do feel it is very important, maybe not relevant today,
Right.
but I feel like it is something that we should all be more aware of.
Right.
And I don't know how to do that.
Well, this is something it's funny. I think of it the same way that you do. And I wish, and I bet I bet some industrious person has done this. Like just a book that, a troubleshooting guide, like, well, if this has happened, then refer to this. And if this, like a flow chart. So it's like, okay, every day we do the lamb in the morning, the lamb in the evening, with the meal offering and the drink offering at both times. Okay. Then if this sin is committed, or if this event happens, then who did it? Well, if it's just a private person, then they give this offering and the grades of the offerings depending on the wealth or stature of the people that are involved in the process. I feel like surely there's got to be because what makes it all mishmash in my head is I feel like there's not as many moving parts. It's just that there's different things for different times, and each time a sacrifice or an offering is made, there's variance between depending on who did it, what their income level is, and so on and so forth. I feel like there's probably actually only a half dozen actual categories for offerings. I've not actually done the homework, but I kind of always mean when we get into this part to try and Google that, see if somebody's actually done the homework on it.
Hey, Sherry,
Yeah.
that's a good point that you brought up. I'll tell you this, there's an old song called Calvary Covers It All. And of course, it's talking about the sacrifice that Messiah Yeshua made when he gave his life, for us on the cross. And when you stop and think about all of the intricate kinds of sacrifices that God talks about in Scripture, it's so meticulous and it's so many types of sacrifices for this and for that. When you think that the one death, how God utilized that death to cover every meticulous aspect of every one of our sins, our thoughts, our agendas that might not be right, every aspect of who we are, that blood in effect covers that entirety. Do you see what I'm saying? Because God is a God of details and he's meticulous. And that one death was so powerful and so far reaching and so intricate that it covered every aspect of what any sacrifice would be required for.
Let's see. I've actually Googled.
I agree with that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I agree with that because it helps in the time, like we have no temple right now, so we can't perform those things. And
Right.
I understand with like Judaism, they have their 3 services a day or their 3 times of prayer, which represent those 3 times of offerings. So there's got to be that to take place of those offerings now. But I just feel like we need to understand it more for the time to come, because from my understanding, when I read, when the kingdom of heaven is established back on earth, that it would be reinstated. So, and I'm sure everything would be taught over again and be like, okay, this is exactly how it's done. So no confusion, just like Moshe went up onto the mountain and he showed it. I'm sure in the world to come, it would happen like that too, which does give me peace that right now we don't have that type of system, but we do have that blood, that sacrifice to carry us through until then. So I am thankful for that, but it is something I've wanted to delve into, but every time I look online and search, it's just so confusing and so in depth. And I'm just like, I know this is important, but I can't process it.
Right.
Maybe it's not my time, but it would be nice, like Joey said, to have it just laid out. Because you have all this sin or this unintentional sin, things you're not aware of, you bring this, or if you can't afford this, you bring this. So yeah, it would be nice to have that easy little flow chart. And if someone does have access to it, I'd appreciate it. But yeah,
I don't know if you can all see this, but Dieter did.
Something.
She sent us a link, and it's funny that I was actually looking at a variation on this same chart that she sent just now. It seems to be pretty accurate. Do y'all see that link?
Saw the link, yes.
do
Okay.
not, because I'm on my phone.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I will put it in the chat
Yes.
so that you can go back and
Please.
peruse it at your leisure.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Did I? Nope, sorry,
Well-
that's the wrong link.
It's interesting to note that in the world to come,
In the Olam Haba. Right.
yes, in the Olam Haba, there will be wonderful sacrifices and votive. Help me, Deirdre, don't let me go off on this. It'll be wonderful sacrifices and votive offerings of praise and honor and love to God. But it will not be sacrifices for sin, because Yeshua's sacrifice for sin is a once and for all complete. In other words, all of these kinds of sacrifices we're looking at for sin that we're reading about in the Torah all culminate completely into the one action of Yeshua giving his life, because that sacrifice covers it all. So even in the Olam Haba, even in the world to come, We will not have sacrifices like that, because that would be going backwards. Yeshua is the purpose of why all of that was there. He is the one that is the end of all of that. When I say the end, I mean it culminates
The goal.
in him. He is the goal of all of that. But the sacrifices that we read that you may want to know about, that I think is a beautiful thing to know about, are the votive offerings, the meal offerings, this, the that,
The high
beautiful,
holy day
the high
offerings.
holy day are
Right.
of praise to God, which are a sweet smelling savory, continue to do for all time, but not blood offerings for sin, because Yeshua took all of that upon himself, and our faith in him justifies us where we do not have to make those sacrifices, because he is that sacrifice.
Right.
Was it right, D?
So all the other sacrifices, like the meal and the drink and the wave and all that kind of thing, right?
The way I look at it
Those
is,
are honor and praise and thank offerings that we will do.
Yeah, from what I understand when I've been reading through it, is that unless there is a sin committed somewhere somehow, then there's not a necessity for a blood ritual or whatever. I'm trying to recall if there's exceptions to that, but from what I can tell, it seems like that blood is used when there's a sin committed, and if you're not trying to fix what was broke when something or somebody sinned, then you don't require blood. So the meal offerings and fellowship and giving because you're grateful or happy or thankful about something, those don't seem to have the same ingredients, I guess would
they
be
don't
a
have that negative
vulgar
aspect.
word for it. Yeah.
Right.
That's always making me wonder too, is how is it that human beings are committing trespasses and yet an animal is the one that suffers like the penalty for that? It's
Right.
kind of like the elephant in the room, I guess, when you're reading through all of this, is how is it that an animal is, suffering the consequences when a human's the one that missed the mark?
Right. To me, and I know this sounds weird and maybe makes it too much of a filthy lucre kind of an idea. I've thought that myself over time. I kind of always almost feel like it's almost like a monetary penalty, but in a time before you have, I mean, you had money at that time. You had the holy temple shekel and that sort of thing. Uh, it seems like it was like it wasn't so much a one for one with the blood of the person being substituted for, is just that it had to be a high price item, you know. And that could be the
Mhm.
wrong way to look at it.
I think it's both. I don't feel like it has to be exclusive.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
saw it as humans are higher, animals are lower, but animals are also life,
Right.
and there's life in blood. And also, if you look at all the animals that are sacrificed, it's clean animals. And when you think of bulls and cows and goats, that kind of thing, there are a lot of false gods in those beings too that people worship. There's a lot of
Right.
people that worship cows or worship bulls, hence being,
Yeah.
the whole
Those animals are also, they're not predators.
Right.
They're considered prey animals. So
true.
Also, if you think about it, they can one for one. When you talk, I've never thought about this. When you said that about how they were animals that have been used as false gods or whatever. Well, if you think about it, a bull, you know, people can make that a false god. Of course, you're talking about golden calf, that sort of thing. But also, people, what does a bull represent? Being able to make other little cattle, so it could represent money. A ram or a goat, we have these things that could represent food to a degree, or the bull itself as well. So it talks about, it could represent money, it could represent wealth, it could represent your ability to make a living, it could represent a consumption problem on the part of the person. That always touches my heart, because that's been one of my big life struggles, is overconsumption. So I mean, it could be, even if we're not talking about worship, just talking about, these things need to be knocked off the throne of people's hearts every day. Some of us. But Deidre, this is a phenomenal that you sent, and I love how it breaks down, because I always wonder, when this sacrifice being referenced, do the priests get some of this, or do they not get some of this? Does it all get burnt? And I love the fact that it actually breaks down.
I'm thinking about making a color coded version of this, because it stands out to my eyeballs a little better.
Right.
I did something similar for basically the just categories of important texts in Judaism, and it was hard for me to keep straight what was commentary and what was tertiary commentary on the commentary.
Right.
And then I just was like, okay, I have to organize this in a way that I can I can see where everything fits. So I made these little blocks and color coded the blocks and kind of put the texts into the blocks where they fit. And I was like, oh, this is a lot easier to deal with now.
Right.
So I'm looking at this chart and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, it tells you the categories, and then it tells you, what you offer, who gets a part of it, So I'm thinking I might need to do something similar, just to kind of help people who are a little more visual, because I can read text all day and it won't go in until I write it out in a chart or something. So
Right. Well, if you do that, please do share. This is a great
Oh, yeah, for
spot
sure.
to start.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm drawing blank now, but no, that would be tremendous. Oh yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I took my Kumash. I've not finished because I kind of fell off the derech about doing it, but I was going through the Kumash and just highlighting all the mitzvah where they appear. Just so.
Yeah, I do the same thing when I'm going through certain texts. I'll take out my highlighter and pick a certain color for a certain thing, and then it just pops out, every time. I'm doing that when I read through parts of the Talmud, because there's like ideas that keep coming back, and I was like, oh, maybe it'll jump out at me if I do this, and it does help. So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what do they
Sending
say?
you guys the
learn.
graphic that I have so far. It's not completely done, but I put it in the side chat, not the side chat, the Facebook group, so you guys can look at it. It's just kind of where I'm going.
Cool.
I think I need to make a couple more adjustments, but yeah,
I like
pretty colors.
I'm with Sherry. I can't look at, I have to look at it after. If I try to look at it now, I'll
Yeah, it'll knock you off your video feed.
I can't.
All right. Well, let's we have drilled down on that pretty good. Let's hit Aliyah 3 before
I'll do it.
all right.
Okay. And Aharon's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his pan, put fire in them, and placed incense upon it. And they brought before the Lord foreign fire, which he had not commanded them. And fire went forth from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moshe said to Aharon, this is what the Lord spoke when he said, I will be sanctified through those near to me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aharon was silent. Moshe summoned Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Aharon's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, draw near, carry your kinsmen from within the sanctuary to the outside of the camp. So they approached and carried them with their tunics to the outside of the camp, as Moshe had spoken. And Moshe said to Aharon and to Eleazar and Ithamar his sons, do not leave your heads unshorn, and do not rend your garments so that you shall not die, and lest he be angry with the entire community. But your brothers, the entire house of Israel, shall bewail the conflagration that the Lord has burned. And do not go out from the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, because the Lord's anointing oil is upon you. And they did according to Moshe's order. And the Lord spoke to Aharon, saying, do not drink wine that will lead to intoxication, neither you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you shall not die. This is an eternal statute for your generations, to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the clean and the unclean, and instruct the children of Israel regarding all the statutes which the Lord has spoken to them through Moshe.
This is a horrible situation.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, he spent all that time being really detailed and, really specific. And then whatever Nadav and Abihu did was not according to that very specific plan, and they got roasted. So, yikes.
Right.
So my thought originally was it being strange fire, so they didn't do it as prescribed. But because it was followed with the drinking part, I began thinking maybe they did that while intoxicated. Rather than it being wrong, they just did it in the wrong manner. They were drunken maybe.
Right.
So I don't know. I was always on the belief that it was because it was strange fire. They did it wrong. They didn't do as prescribed. But because it is immediately followed with the alcohol part, I took it as that was part of the issue. Does that make sense? So I don't know. Does anybody have any?
He's also telling him you're not gonna mourn for your brothers the same way that you would normally mourn. I know that Kohanim already had kind of stricter instructions for when a family member passed, so that they wouldn't become ritually unclean. But your immediate family members getting struck down like that, and you're not allowed to rend your garments or shave your head or whatever, that's intense. He's like, you can't even come out of the entrance of the tent of meeting. You're still covered with oil, the anointing oil.
Right.
Like everyone else, they can mourn and be upset and bewail, but you're not allowed to. It's like
Because they had to carry them out with their tunics, so they didn't touch them.
Yeah. Trying to see if there's anything in the commentaries that kind of touch on some particulars.
Well, in verse 10, the Rashi is this who's talking here, says, so that you can distinguish between the holy service and the one that has been profaned. Thus you have learned that if one performed a particular service after having drunk wine, it is invalid. So
it's related to wine according to Rashi then?
Yeah.
Seems that way. Okay.
Things that
Always he did the wrong prescription of the whole firing.
I found another reference as well to that. His Kuni is saying that this is another one. Someone's quoting someone quoting someone. According to Rashi, quoting Rabbi Eliezer, the reason why the sons of Aharon were killed is that they had taken it to themselves the right to render halakhic rulings while their mentor Moses was still alive and well. So, you have the guy right there getting the red telephone to heaven, as it were, and they decide they're going to just make up their own procedures.
Right.
The use of the word foreign
Mm-hmm.
to me is the key.
I need to pull the interlinear for that one.
It's not following the halakhic the beauty of the way it should be done. I can't say that word.
Look up that word.
But foreign, shy of that prescribed way
Right.
is a problem with him.
Well,
Let's see. Aish Zalra. To be a stranger. Zur. It comes from to be a stranger. So that is the most accurate rendering right there. To come from another place, to turn aside, especially for lodging. So it, like, the root word is saying it's the kind of person who's traveling, but you pull over to rest. So like modern day would be like you pull over at a roadside motel, that kind of stranger.
Right.
So
You turn
maybe
aside.
they drank and ended up doing it wrong.
That's the way I always look at it. I always compile the two things on there. One, they had the instructions. They were fresh. They were day one instructions. This is the first time doing it. So either they were careless in doing it, this all happened, and then just secondarily, completely non sequitur, God said, oh yeah, y'all don't drink either when y'all are doing your service. To me, it reads more like they were drinking and therefore they performed the improper service, or, a
Mhm.
foreign fire.
That makes better sense. It combines the
I
two.
kind of always read it backwards. Like, this happened, this is what they did, or this is what they did, this is what came from it, and this is why they ended up doing it that way. So it kind of rolls it back up, But that's just my personal.
Also reading, when I read this, I'm thinking like, okay, taking the, I guess, more literal reading is like strange fire or fire from a foreign place. Isn't there a fire that's kept burning like perpetually before the Lord?
Right.
So they're adding fire that didn't come from,
They didn't take fire from
I guess a consecrated place. It's like you're just throwing your own fire. You may have started like a campfire, 4 feet away and brought it in, and it's like no.
Actually, it may lend that information to us. Let's see.
Because right now the sages that I'm reading through are they're going back and forth on what it means to die in the presence of the Lord, because like we're all kind of in the presence, but they were kind of debating whether or not they were on a like super holy ground when it happened,
Right.
or if they were just in kind of like general holy ground, I guess.
Right. Well, it says they were within the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
So my wondering is kind of what you were saying. Did they bring fire from outside and carry it into the sanctuary? Or did they do something to foul proper fire? But we know that it's the reason why I put them together in regards to they have made some error, is because it is a profane or foreign or improper fire. And then it says, don't drink alcohol. In verse 10, so that you can distinguish between holy and profane, between clean and unclean, specifically for that. And then it goes on to say, and so that you can instruct the children of Israel regarding the statutes. So, you know, 2 times something is referred to as, foreign or profane or not holy. And
I found it. Rashi on Leviticus 10:2. He's quoting Rabbi Eliezer again, and he talks about, the sons died because they gave their own decisions, but Moses was right there. So, like, why are you trying to circumvent him? And then he quotes Rabbi Ishmael, who says, they died because they entered the sanctuary intoxicated by wine. You may know that this is so because after their death, he admonished those who survived that they should not enter when intoxicated by wine. A parable. It may be compared to a king. Okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he then goes on to quote another text. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a little bit, that's a common thing.
Yeah, drunkenness will make you not do things exactly as prescribed. You might miss a step somewhere in there.
Earlier, Moshe was like, the sons of Aaron can bring fire and incense.
Right.
And so they're probably thinking, like, well, we're sons of Aaron, we can bring it. But if they were intoxicated, they obviously didn't bring the right kind.
Right.
So they
Well-
obviously they didn't have, I'm saying obviously, but presumably they didn't have, an evil intent. They were trying to, like, offer whatever they're going to offer, but they did it wrong.
Right.
So, yikes.
It's not entirely.
I may have,
Sorry.
I was just saying, I may have missed this, but had people been, with their sacrifices and their bread offering and all that, had anybody brought wine offering or anything? And I was just wondering if they were drinking kind of the sacramental wine or something, you know what I mean?
That reminds me of Robin Hood Men in Tights.
I was about to say, well, all
Rabbi
good.
always like, this is sacramental wine. It's used to bless things.
Well, I don't see it in this week's Parsha that they brought it yet, but that doesn't mean it doesn't say it before.
Yeah, it's not always chronological. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they were dipping into the sacramental wine.
Too long didn't read. Bring what he told you to bring. Don't bring extra stuff. Do it the way he said.
Bring something that's supposed to be meant for something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I always I get a little frustrated with, our Christian brothers and sisters because they have this idea that they can just kind of make up the way that they do stuff when there's like prescribed ways to do certain things. And it's kind of frustrating that, like, when you're given a clear way, they don't want to do it. But then when you're not given a clear way, they want to, like, say, no, this is the one specific method. And I'm like, why can't you just do the simple thing?
Hey, we're all guilty of that to some degree.
Oh man.
Yeah. I know.
Well, I'm just gonna do the mitzvot in my heart. Well, how do you, like, what? How do you do that in your heart? Like, come on.
Where are we at now?
See. Did anybody have any other thoughts about Aliyah 3? These poor boys.
Yeah.
Drink the drink. I don't know if it was the drink that killed them, but the fire and the drink together for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which reminds me of Miss Doubtfire.
Right.
Right. Literally.
One day as a woman, you're already getting hot flashes.
Well, who would like to read Aliyah 4? It's nice and short. All right, I'll do it. You guys browbeat me into it. Leviticus chapter 10, verses 12 through 15. And Moses spoke to Aaron and his surviving sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. Take the meal offering that is left over from the Lord's fire offerings and eat it as unleavened loaves beside the altar, for it is a holy of holies. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your portion and your son's portion from the Lord's fire offerings, for so I have been commanded. The breast of the waving and the thigh of the raising up you shall eat it in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you, for as your portion and your son's portion they have been given from the peace offerings of the children of Israel. They shall bring the thigh of the raising up and the breast of the waving upon the fats for the offerings, to wave as a waving before the Lord, and it shall belong to you and to your sons with you as an eternal due, as the Lord has commanded. I feel like if we go ahead and jump to the fifth Aliyah, we're going to get the rest of this story here,
Okay.
because there's something that kind of happens. There's all a couple verses. I'll read those two. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 16. And Moses thoroughly investigated concerning the sin offering he-goat, and behold, it had been burnt, like completely, like an Ola offering. So he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's surviving sons, saying, why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? For it is a holy of holies, and he has given it to you to gain forgiveness for the sin of the community, to effect the atonement before the Lord. Behold, its blood was not brought into the sanctuary within. So, sorry. Okay. So you should have surely eaten it with the holy precincts as I commanded. And Aaron spoke to Moses, but today did they offer up their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord? But if the tragic events like these had befallen me, and if I had eaten a sin offering today, would it have pleased the Lord? Moses heard this, and it pleased him. So,
Aaron, extenuating circumstances.
right,
Moshe, yeah, you're right.
right. This here does kind of go back to that point being made earlier, what was being said about not being allowed to make halakhic rulings. I don't think
Mhm.
this is necessarily halakhic ruling in regards to, this is a specific scenario, not a ongoing event. And no halakha was actually changed or altered
Yeah.
in any way. But it was definitely, you know, extenuating circumstance, a specific that hopefully would never happen again. Of course, we did also kind of, I just realized we kind of ran over the Ananias and Sapphira parallel to the sons of Aaron, that they lied to the Holy Spirit. At least this is what's recorded in, I think, in the book of Acts, that they lied to the Holy Spirit. They had sold a piece of property. They said they gave the whole amount of the property, but they didn't. They held some back, and they died for their sin. Again, it's important to make reference here that the sin they committed was not keeping the entirety of the, or not giving, not all of the property. When you're giving an offering, you don't have to give the entirety of that thing. That was not a stated rule in this scenario. It was that they lied that they had done it when they had not. Um, uh, so kind of reminds me of people doing their taxes. Uh, they claim the entirety of the the tax exemption gifts or whatever, or charitable giving. They claim the maximum that they can claim, even though they did not meet that maximum. Um, so the sin was not giving it. The sin is lying that you did when you did not. And I think it's important to parse those things out.
Mhm.
But yes, Aaron and his sons both had lost their appetite in a very understandable fashion.
Yeah, the commentaries are saying that Aaron was like, well, if you're in mourning, you're not allowed to eat certain offerings. And, I was technically not mourning, but my sons hadn't even been buried. And yeah,
Right.
he's like, it's kind of a technicality. The Or Hachaim says, and Aharon spoke harshly to Moses. They're saying that the word that is being used there means to harshly respond. So he probably sassed Moses back there. Moses like, what are you doing? I told you to eat this. What are you doing? He's like, hey, they already brought the offering. Look at all the stuff that just now happened.
Right.
Like, are you kidding?
Right. Hey, I'll be honest with you. This is something that may not be the healthiest idea in the world, but I'll be honest with you. Very few things in my life could I have ever said this about. I can say this as a parent. If my sons, God forbid, were taken from earth, um, I don't know that I would want to be on earth. And at that point, it, from Aaron's perspective, he might have just been like, God, if you're mad, just take me, because I'm already suffering so much. I can't. If you want to take me too, if I've fallen short of your requirement, just take me out as well, and just kind of throw up his hands and burn the whole thing. And I don't have it in me to eat the food at this point. Blah blah blah, whatever. And that might have been his thoughts and or feelings on it. I could totally understand point of view, if that were in fact something that was in play.
I mean, he's got a lot going on in his life, and Moses is getting mad at his remaining two sons,
Right.
Because they didn't do what he thought they should do. And Aaron's like, wait, hold up.
Right.
They did their part, but the sages are like, well, he's the high priest, and he's like, Moses, look, it's my job ultimately to oversee this. So why are you getting mad at them? Just come at me. Like, if I
Right.
had eaten it, would the Lord have been happy with it?
Right.
Moses is like, all right.
All this talk about food, I'm so hungry.
And also it's kind of the scriptures talks about judging another man's servant, which I think is one of the most important scriptures in there. God's already made it plain and clear that if someone half steps in their service to him, he is not above coming and getting him himself. So if they did something and they seem to be out of order in regards to Moses' feelings, not that Moses shouldn't question it, because a good supervisor, does question, like, this wasn't exactly right. Is this what we're doing? What are we doing here? But at the same time, if God had not been pleased with the way they handled that, he's made it clear that he, will show up and show out and do his thing if he wants something done about it.
I mean,
Again, not taking away the role of someone who supervises or whatever, or leadership.
We know that, like, Moses had a few times where maybe his temper got a little bit aggressive. I'm trying to be nice. I can't blame him. If I had to go through that stuff for 40 years, I can't say that I wouldn't be like, and hit the rock. Okay, I don't know if I'm that good.
Right.
But he did get frustrated a lot, and there is a potential reading of this passage where he's like, there's a way to do things. Why didn't you do things the right way? And Aaron's like, part of my family just died.
Right.
Extenuating circumstances, guy.
Right.
And Moses kind of chills out. It says when he heard this, he approved. It's like, okay. I feel like that's also a good lesson to put in there, because we're supposed to follow, I guess, the rules, but even in modern Judaism, like the halakha is considered like sacrosanct if you're conservative and if you're Orthodox, but you can even override the most sacred rule on Shabbat in order to save a life.
Right.
That's considered like the preeminent command, is to save the life of another person. And if it requires you, breaking technical laws on Shabbat, then you do it. And it's like, the situation you would say, well, God, I followed your Shabbat. And he'd be like, yeah, but you didn't save a life. There's a human being right there. Like, God doesn't need our service in the same way that a human would require you to intervene. So I feel like there's a parallel there where it's like, well, yeah, the rules are there, follow them, but extenuating circumstances.
Right. Well, and never mind the fact that Hashem didn't break any halakha or mitzvah or anything like that in what he did, but he did, move heaven and earth to save us, so again, that's not saying anything about God or the Messiah breaking any rules or anything, but just saying, like, he's shown us to what great lengths, we're allowed to do what is the greater good from time to time.
Yeah.
You always help someone. If someone's in need, it even says in the Torah, if your enemies, whatever ox falls over, you are to help them up. Even if it is Shabbat, you are supposed to help them. So even though you have your rules for Shabbat, if someone is in need or if someone is in danger, you step in, because life is life, and life creates generations. So that one person creates a multitude of souls right there.
Right.
You always choose kindness and love.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it
Unless
comes
somebody's
across as like
moving.
really callous to be like,
I'm
well,
not helping
I'm
them if
too
they're
busy
moving.
being religious to help somebody. It's like, come
Right.
on, really?
Right.
Right, that's a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Well, wow, that leaves a super long one. Ben, would you like to read anything tonight? Are you in the mix? Are you with kids? Don't let us jump on you unnecessarily. You may have fallen asleep.
Oh man, I love this chapter. I forgot this is right in the middle of this one.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's kind of a weird like non sequitur. Oh, and by the way,
Is it though?
well,
I always have to ask that. It's like,
I mean, it did just talk about teaching the people the difference between clean and unclean.
mm-hmm.
If this is chronological, then this is certainly a teaching of clean and unclean. So sleep off your drunk and then teach the kids chapter 11. Would anybody like to read 11? Chapter 11 verses?
If nobody else does it, then I'll do it.
You go ahead then.
Sweet. Okay. And the Lord spoke to Moshe and Aharon to say to them, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, these are the creatures that you can eat from among all the animals on the earth. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that's completely split into double hooves and which brings up its cud, that one you may eat. But these you shall not eat among those that bring up cud and those who have a cloven hoof. The camel, because it brings up its cud, but it doesn't have a completely cloven hoof, is unclean for you. The hyrax, because it brings up its cud, but doesn't have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the hare, because it chews up cud, but it doesn't have a completely cloven hoof or hooves at all, it is unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a cloven hoof that is completely split, but it doesn't regurgitate its cud, it is unclean for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, you shall not touch their carcasses, they are unclean for you. Among all that are in the water, you may eat these. Any in the water that have fins and scales, those you can eat, whether it lives in the waters, in the seas, or in the rivers. But any that don't have fins and scales, whether in the sea or the river, among all the creeping creatures in the water and among all the living creatures that are in the water, they're an abomination to you. And they shall be an abomination for you. You shall not eat their flesh, and their dead bodies you shall hold an abomination. Any creature that doesn't have fins and scales in the water is an abomination to you. And among birds, you shall hold these an abomination. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. Okay, it's an abomination. The eagle, or the griffin vulture, the kite, the osprey, the kestrel, and the vulture after its species, and the raven after its species, the ostrich, the jay and the sparrowhawk, the goshawk after its species, the owl, the gull, and the little owl, the bat, the starling, the magpie, the stork, the heron after its species, the hoopoe, and the atalef, which they're not sure if that means bat. Any flying insect that walks on four legs is an abomination for you. However, among all the flying insects that walk on four legs, you can eat from among those that have jointed leg-like extensions above its regular legs, with which they hop on the ground. From this category, you can eat the following: the red locust after its species, the yellow locust after its species, the spotted gray locust after its species, and the white locust after its species. But any other flying insect that has four legs is an abomination to you. And through these you will become unclean. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is not completely split, and which does not bring up cud, is unclean for you. Anyone who touches them shall be unclean. And among all the animals that walk on four legs, any that walks on its paws is unclean for you. Anyone who touches their carcass will be unclean until evening. And one who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he will be unclean until evening. They are unclean for you. And this is unclean for you among creeping creatures that creep on the ground: the weasel, the mouse, and the toad after its species, the hedgehog, the chameleon, the lizard, the snail, and the mole. These are the ones that are unclean for you among all the creeping creatures. Anyone who touches them when they're dead will be unclean until evening. And if any of these dead creatures falls upon anything, it will become unclean, whether it's a wooden vessel, garment, hide, or sack, any vessel with which work is done. It shall be immersed in water, but it will remain unclean until evening, and then it will become clean.
Beautiful job.
Tremendous.
So is there a difference between those that make you unclean and those that are an abomination?
Mollusks. Crustaceans.
I always assumed that they were the unclean and the abomination were the same. I could be wrong though.
I just noticed
Oh,
at this time the difference of the words.
Let's see. I have to pull up that.
Well, just to bring it into the 2020-2021 time frame, we're not allowed to eat animals that have palms, or sorry, what do
Pads.
dogs have?
Pads.
Pads.
Paws and pads. And I would like to point out that this is not a slam dunk, but the science points out that SARS, everybody remembers SARS, that came from eating like a couple of different kind of pawed animals. And it says specifically not to eat animals that walk around on paws. And then we know that MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome, coronavirus that happened, is believed to come from the eating of camels, which is specifically forbidden in this chapter. And right now, we're of the assumption, or at least the educated guess, that maybe the consumption of bats is what caused COVID-19. So if we'd all just do what Leviticus chapter 11 says, we wouldn't have SARS, MERS, or COVID right now. So,
or at least not those strains.
Yeah.
Joey, to answer your question, the unclean word and the detestable thing, they are two different words. So unclean is tame, which is pretty on the face of it, just to become unclean. And then the detestable thing that it uses for the stuff in the water, shekates. It comes from the root word to be filthy, like just utterly disgustingly filthy. So the denominative of that, like when you start to conjugate it, it means something that you just look at it and you're like, that is disgusting. That is filthy nasty.
So I'm wondering if it's the differentiator is that they're unclean animals that are unclean at all times for consumption. And those are the things that are abominations to eat. But then there are animals who are kosher, but then become unclean, either because they are torn or abused, or I think even die of themselves is a thing. That just makes them unclean. It changes their status from kosher to not kosher. And then the thing that you should never have eaten to begin with, whether you find it alive or dead, is the other thing.
Yeah, to me, like I've never particularly liked shellfish. My dad loved oysters. That was just like his jam. But there's a way to read this, like when I've ever gone through it, is that like animals have a function in the ecosystem. So they're not bad animals. I mean, they have a job. You know, they eat things and mow the grass and all that stuff. So it's fine. You just can't eat every single thing. You know, there's animals of prey, there's birds of prey that you're not supposed to eat. We're not told specifically, but my human understanding is like if it eats something else, don't eat it. So that's stuff for like land animals and birds. But when it comes to the water stuff, things that are fish, you know, you have fins and scales, like, okay, cool. Things that don't have fins and scales tend to be bottom feeders or filter animals or stuff of that nature. So they're just still doing their job, but because they're kind of filtering the water and stuff like that, they're just sucking up all the gross waste, which
Right.
is what makes them like filthy, nasty, gross. Someone compared it one time to like the filter on your fish tank. It is extremely useful, but you wouldn't eat it.
Right.
So I feel like that's maybe a difference there, is not just the function, but also what is in them when they're existing. I don't know.
Right.
I could
Well,
be missing that entirely.
we can make a same comparison in respect about what God says about sins. He calls sin, and there's certain things that occur as a result. And then it says, there are some things that he hates
Yeah.
that are utterly detestable. So there is a variance with this situation for whatever reason he decides it is there,
Yeah.
Right.
But even with sin, there's some things that he considers that are utterly detestable,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see that too. There's a difference between stealing the little eggs from a mama bird and murdering someone. They're
Exactly.
both sin. They're both breaking a rule he said not to do, but ooh, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
That's why I kind of hate it when I don't want to say that, like, oh, my understanding is definitely the reason that he said not to eat it. He didn't say why not to,
Exactly.
avoid these animals. Like, he didn't say why those specific birds are unclean. We can only kind of guess, but there's a lot of modern thought that, like, oh, the laws were outdated because you couldn't cook certain meats to a certain temperature to kill the, inherent bacteria. Like, he didn't say that.
Right.
And if they had fires that were hot enough to melt metal, you could cook meat to the right temperature. So they could smelt things and make gold and all sorts of stuff. So that burns way hotter than a steak. So,
Right.
yeah.
Throughout your generations forever.
Right.
Right. Or the old they didn't have refrigeration.
Right.
argument.
Right.
That's the one I've heard the most in my lifetime. I've never heard actually the fire argument because I'm like, that doesn't.
Yeah, I got that one a lot. People were like, yeah, you couldn't cook pork to the right temperature because of the, trichinosis and da-da-da. And I'm like, literally, they were making swords and chariot wheels and gold idols. So, no.
There people go again trying to God.
Well,
Yeah, I'm like, look, I'm not God. If you eat it, I can't say anything to you. Like, there's not a penalty listed here for eating this stuff. Like if you eat chametz during Pesach, or if you have seor in your house, there is a penalty listed. But for these, it just says, don't do it. It's abomination. It doesn't say like, oh, you're going to be cut off or you're going to stone somebody. It just says, don't do it. So,
Well, now
What
you might get
was that old joke that
start a whole new
you'll
coronavirus.
be saved and go to heaven, but you just might be going earlier?
Huh? What was that?
You'll still be saved and going to heaven, but you just may be going earlier.
Right. Right.
and this doesn't, I don't consider it like a sin because it says you're just unclean till morning
Well, but
or until evening.
that's right. But you could drive that boat in a different path too.
like dead bodies and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
And two, maybe it's just there's a lot of physical reasons why these animals shouldn't be eaten, but maybe it's just a sign of obedience.
Yeah.
It comes right down to obedience, because it says that, later on in scriptures, this will be food for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't say it's not food for everybody else, but it says this is what will be food for you.
Yeah, setting people apart, making them holy. Like,
That's
Yeah.
right.
Like you're not going to be like all the kids in the neighborhood.
exactly.
Right.
Because that's one of the biggest things that you can tell, someone is serving the God of Israel versus serving a different God, is you look at like Shabbat, you look at their diet, you kind of look at, I guess circumcision, that's a big one too. And they just set you apart. And
Right.
Right.
Well, it's amazing one could look at all of this and say, gee, that's taken away my personal freedom. In essence, it's making you free because you're obeying and you have an overwhelming sense of rightness with God.
Right.
And
I mean,
that sets you free.
yeah, it's the rabbis say that every person is to regard themselves as if they personally came out of Egypt. And if that's the case, then he redeemed us so he can do whatever he wants.
That's right.
You know, he has the right to tell me what laws I should follow because I belong to his nation now. If I didn't want to belong to his nation, I would go back to Egypt.
Right.
And, you know, some people did. And, you know, even Joshua said that, you know, hey, you guys do what you want, but we're going this way, you know. So I feel like by staying in the community, you're saying, yeah, I'm going to follow this covenant. He has his part, I have my part, and I'm agreeing to it, you know. So, it,
Well, it's a kingdom, and
yeah,
we're not familiar with that kind of life. And
yeah,
in kingdoms, you know, you're a subject, and you're totally subjected to the whims of that king. Thankfully, we have a benevolent and kind king who doesn't exact or extract, you know, uh,
petty.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
tolls, unnecessary tolls, and
Mhm.
you know, which you know, and that's what he told him. He's like, look, you're gonna want a king, and this is how you should go about it. But I wanted to be your king. You know,
Yeah,
be
that breaks my heart
It doesn't
every time. That just crushes me every time I read that. He's like, I wanted to be your king.
right.
You know, and I'm just like, I'm like, sorry, my ancestors.
Mhm.
Oh, we hurt your heart. Like, we upset you
And
legitimately.
looking at
I'm
the,
so
you know,
sorry.
and
Like,
looking at the Torah as a constitution sort of document as well. That just this is the way, you know. Hey, he's the king. This is the way he likes
yeah.
it. This is the way we're gonna do it. You know, we want to
And
be
the
part
rules
of his
for a
kingdom.
bondservant are in there for a reason. Like, you are serving somebody, but you love them so much. You're like, you know what? I'm staying with you. And you kind of make that official. You know, you do the ear piercing thing through the doorpost, and you're like, no, I love my master. Like, I love him. I want to serve him. I want to stay.
Right.
And that's huge. It's like, you know, he brought us out of Egypt. He did all these amazing things. He didn't let us starve in the desert. He didn't even let our shoes wear out. You know, he gave us water. We never lacked for anything. I want to stay.
And specifically into that scenario, he gave us our spouses and our children. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, if we don't want to continue to serve the Lord, we may also be leaving behind the privilege of our spouses and our children as well.
Yeah. The
Uh,
Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, surely there were some people that separated from family
for
or
sure.
friends, you know, when they were like, no, I'm out of here. Like,
This God showed up and showed out. He's the real
yeah,
one, so we're going where he says.
yeah.
Yeah. And surely must be a better thing than living under their Pharaoh in
And
his
they probably thought the people leaving were insane. I
right.
mean, this is your system. These are the ones you've known. This is like your whole culture. And they're like, nah, I'm going to go do this totally new thing that you guys have never really heard about. Probably
Yeah.
thought they were nuts.
Right. All right. So let's do Alia 7 and wrap this thing. So would anybody like to read it?
Make Bridget do it.
All
Wait,
right.
how long it is? You know, I don't like those long ones.
It's
You'll be all right.
long.
Is it starts with Leviticus 11?
Yeah.
11:33 through 47.
I gotta read that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I do like this one then. But any earthenware vessel into whose interior any of them falls, whatever is inside it shall become unclean, and you shall break it, the vessel itself. Of any food that is unusually eaten, upon which water comes, will become unclean, and any beverage that is usually drunk which is in any vessel shall become unclean. And anything upon which any of their carcasses of these animals fall will become unclean. Thus, an oven or stove shall be demolished. They are unclean, and they shall be unclean for you. But a spring or a cistern, a gathering of water, remains clean. However, one who touches their carcass shall become unclean. And if of their carcasses falls upon any sowing seed to be sown, it remains clean. But if water is put on seeds and any of their carcasses fall on them, they are unclean for you. If an animal that you normally eat dies, one who touches the carcass shall be unclean till evening. And the one who eats of its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And the one who carries its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And any creeping creature that creeps on the ground is an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Any creature that goes on its belly, and any creature that walks on four legs, to any creature that has many legs among all creeping creatures that creep on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourself abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and you shall not defile yourself with them, that you should become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God, and you shall sanctify yourself and be holy, because I am holy, and you shall not defile yourselves through any creeping creature that crawls on the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. Thus you shall be holy, because I am holy. This is the law regarding animals, birds, all living creatures that move in the water, and all creatures that creep on the ground, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten.
Amen.
The things on which they fall.
Mhm. So, yeah.
I'm just saying that Peter quoted this and Paul quoted it. And they both were like, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." All of those quotations come from the food laws.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
I just thought it was pretty extreme that an oven or stove shall be demolished.
Weren't their ovens made out of like clay
I was gonna
or
say maybe
earthenware?
clay.
If they were earthenware, then they're probably really porous. So that's really hard to get like scoured clean.
It's like isn't it like a pizza stone or something like that?
I think so. I just know that like especially the rabbinic rules on when you kosher a kitchen for Passover,
Mhm.
it's really useful to use glass because that's not porous. So things that are really really porous, certain types of metal and ceramic, they either just put them aside or don't use them because of that.
Right.
That's why you have the separate dairy and meat dishes, unless it's made of a certain material like the glass you mentioned, and a certain kind of steel, because it's not as porous. So you could use it as long as they're washed in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For most metals, I think you can just use like boiling water and it's fine. So
That's my understanding too.
I use the little wand.
I
I use
used
the little wand thing.
I
Oh,
used to think that
You cut that part out.
I used to think that you couldn't eat an animal that dies of itself. I thought that was unclean, but here in 39 it says if an animal you normally eat dies, one who touches its carcass shall be unclean, and one who eats of its carcass shall immerse his garments, be unclean. So maybe it is unclean, but that you're still able to eat it. Now I know that an animal that is torn, like gored or whatever
Yeah.
by another animal, God said it becomes unclean, but you can feed it to your other animals, like to dogs or whatever.
All I can think is bacteria.
Yeah.
yes.
Well, if an animal gets driven through, it's gonna, all of a sudden its organs are all meeting at some point and they're spilling out. So, but just eating something that's died of itself, I guess if you catch it fast enough, like if you see it and it honks out, it's like, let's eat. I mean, this is,
I can't
I
think of a
mean,
reason it would just drop dead unless it had a stroke or something.
well, I mean,
Animals
it could
get
just be
strokes.
old. It could be old.
That's true.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
that
That's having
Eat some
chickens.
old-
Like
Prep it.
we've had a couple of chickens die just of their own demise, and we didn't eat them. We just, tossed them and covered them.
Right.
But we did have one where Jalen accidentally stepped on his back, on her back, and we had to just put it down, because it broke its back, and we didn't eat it either,
Right.
because it was harmed.
Right.
But I don't know, with our chickens, I just can't see us eating them unless somebody else did it, because Blake had to put a couple of them down actually, and it was so hard to do.
Right.
And obviously we're not doing it right because we don't know how to really put them down, but we try to do it as quick as possible. But
I
it
think
just
it
did
ran
not
their
feel,
necks.
it did not feel good.
Do
No.
what my grandma did and just chop their head off like super fast.
Right. Yeah,
Then
I've seen it done both
Grandma.
ways. My uncle wrang a chicken's neck in my presence, and I've also seen him chop one's head off.
I'm sorry. This is a very
I've
sore
seen that
subject
too.
for me. I ate my own pet chicken, so let's just stop this nonsense.
Well, how did you go
They'll
about
just
it
keep
then?
eating their
No
eggs.
chickies.
There,
You're
I
the,
think I've got one I can heat up in the here.
You're the expert then. What did you go? Did you go choppy choppy or choky choky?
Me?
Yeah.
I was a tiny little girl. I had a pet chicken. It's a long story. And I was in high school and I asked my mother, okay, I'm an adult now. I know that its name was Little Bitty. I said, I know Little Bitty did go see its grandma. And I come back, what happened? And she said, well, I sent you down to the neighbors. And we had her for supper that evening. And I said, you ate my chicken. And she grinned and said, you ate it too.
Ah, no.
I can't do it. I'm so attached to my chickens. I'm just like, give me your eggs. That's it. I don't
Right.
like when the tornadoes came last week. We had our chickens' eggs that we were incubating, and they were like 2 weeks in, so we were getting close to hatch day actually. And the power went out, and it was out for 2 days, and obviously their temperature and humidity was all off. So yeah, we waited a few days and realized they weren't growing anymore. They weren't moving or anything when we candled them. So we buried them all. It was sad.
Very sad.
I'm too attached to it. I can't do it. I
I'm right
can't.
there with you,
When I,
Sharon. I'm right
when I
there.
see them, you live your life. Just give me your eggs before they do their thing.
Yep. Yep.
Well, this, my friends, has now officially become my favorite Midrash the Yoke Messiah has performed. And without knowing what you're saying on the other than the video, I'll just end with you're welcome. And if you would like to continue this conversation, including animal husbandry or anything else, you can find us at facebook.com/group/Yoke of Messiah. Thank you again so much for visiting with us. If you need to reach me directly, you can at yokeofmessiah@gmail.com. Shalom Aleichem.
And I can